It's important that the ancestors know that we're here to support them. I started coming here to pray every morning in September of 2019. Somebody has been coming every day since then. People just don't know. You know, our history is not taught. And so they don't really know the story of the Battle of the Alamo. They don't really know the story of the Alamo, period.
The story that history books tell us about the Alamo usually goes like this. Americans oppressed by a Mexican dictator come to Texas, take up arms, and fight their own revolution for freedom and liberty. At the Alamo, over 13 days in 1836, a group of scrappy underdog rebels fight to the death against a massive Mexican army. And even though they lose, the battle becomes a pivotal step toward ultimately establishing the Republic of Texas. But the real story is much bigger than that. And a debate over how we really should remember the Alamo is now at the center of what the Alamo Trust estimates is a multi-year, $250 million renovation project.
The idea is it needs an upgrade. And part of that will be building a new museum. But the big debate really is, what story are you going to tell in that museum? We like to say that the Alamo is like the Western Wall of Texas. Everyone has a claim to it.
When you do talk about the Alamo, you're just locking it into a period of time. You're locking it into a 13 unfortunate days of a battle that happened in a 100-year history. So there's a whole gap of history of a people that gets left untold.
Before it was the Alamo, it was Mission San Antonio de Valero, populated by Spanish priests and indigenous people who had converted to Catholicism. Records say that more than 1,300 people are buried on its grounds, most of whom were members of indigenous tribes. Te Palam represents their descendants.
We have members whose grandparents are buried in the cemetery of Valero, aunts and uncles, cousins.
In 1989, 1995, and again in 2019, human remains were uncovered during excavation work at the Alamo. And now, Te Palam is fighting to tell the history of its indigenous ancestors buried there, and to have the area declared an official cemetery with legal protections, which so far the state has refused to do.
Our families took vows to protect these remains and to ask for forgiveness for those who disturbed their final resting place, and ask for forgiveness for us as a people for allowing this to happen. And I'll make one thing clear, we are proponents of this project. Our children and the unborn children that inherit this are either going to be proud of what our generation did, or they're going to be ashamed because we couldn't get it right.
So remember that story about the band of underdog heroes fighting for freedom?
Unfortunately, almost none of that is true. The battle for the Alamo was more about protecting slavery than holding on to liberty. The Mexican government wanted to take away slavery, and that's what the revolution was really all about.
The idea that slavery played a major part in the Texas Revolution isn't a new one, but it's one that Alamo traditionalists have taken issue with.
I have been to well over 100 courthouses, some of them 2 or 3 times. My research started about 30 years ago when I did find out I was an Alamo descendant. My job has been to bring faces and stories of the lives of the defenders to the public's knowledge. You're looking at a great many people, and people at a time that have various belief systems, various ideals, and I think that's very simplistic to say all wanted this or all wanted that. The majority of our defenders, if they all are just common guys without slaves, I don't think they're standing there dying for some rich planter in Georgia or Alabama that can bring slaves in here.
In August, after years of back and forth, the Alamo finally broke ground on its first major construction project, a 24,000 square foot exhibit hall. The story that should be told in the exhibit hall, though, that's still up for debate.
The history is multiple layers, and it's okay to tell all the layers. Now to say, well, wait a minute, that battle was just a very short period of time. Yes, that's correct. But why do people go to the Alamo? It's because of the battle.
There has been a lot of controversy surrounding the Alamo project over the years, but I'm still optimistic. I think what's interesting about places like the Alamo is we have an opportunity to complete the history, the story. From my perspective, the Alamo is big enough to tell all the stories.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.